This is the 7th day of the July 93 7-day retreat in Springwater. On the 7th day, at least in Springwater, we read from selections that have slightly varied over the decades, accumulated somewhat. Wang Po, by popular request, is back on top of the pile. Since last retreat. Since this is all copyrighted material, this is being taped, but it will not be for sale. Wang Po's selections are from the Zen teaching of Wang Po, translated by John Blofeld. Each selection is not read in its entirety the way it's printed here. Words, sentences are eliminated, sometimes changed. A Sanskrit word may be changed. For people not versed in Buddhism, Buddha does not just refer to the historical personage of Gautama Buddha, but is a word for an enlightened being. These sermonettes and dialogue, all of which took place about 1,000 years ago, were recorded by Wang Po's student, disciple of Buddhist scriptures, student of Buddhist scriptures, and also the governor of the province where Wang Po lived. Wang Po was a Zen teacher. The master said to me, "All the Buddhas and all sentient beings are nothing but the one mind, beside which nothing exists. This mind, which is without beginning, is unborn and indestructible. It is not green nor yellow and has neither form nor appearance. It does not belong to the categories of things which exist or do not exist, nor can it be thought of in terms of new or old. It is neither long nor short, big nor small, for it transcends all limits, measures, names, traces, and comparisons. It is that which you see before you. Begin to reason about it, and you at once fall into error. It is like the boundless void which cannot be fathomed or measured. One mind alone is the Buddha, and there is no distinction between the Buddha and sentient beings, but that sentient beings are attached to forms and so seek externally for Buddhahood. By their very seeking they lose it, for that is using mind to grasp mind. Even though they do their utmost for a full eon, they will not be able to attain to it. They do not know that if they put a stop to conceptual thought and forget their anxiety, the Buddha will appear before them. For this mind is the Buddha, and the Buddha is all living beings. It is not the less for being manifested in ordinary beings, nor is it greater for being manifested in the Buddhas. Our original nature is, in highest truth, devoid of any atom of objectivity. It is void, omnipresent, silent, pure. It is glorious and mysterious, peaceful joy. And that is all. Enter deeply into it by awakening to it yourself. That which is before you is it, in all its fullness, utterly complete. There's naught beside. Even if you go through all the stages of progress one by one, when at last in a single flash you attain to realization, you will only be realizing that which has been with you all the time. And by all the foregoing stages, you will have added nothing to it at all. You will come to look upon those eons of work and achievement as no better than unreal actions performed in a dream. That's why the Buddha said, I truly attained nothing from complete, unexcelled enlightenment. This is a dialogue. Questioner. What is the way, and how must it be followed? Wangpo. What sort of thing do you suppose the way to be that you should wish to follow it? Questioner. What instructions have the masters everywhere given for meditation practice and the study of the truth? Wangpo. Words used to attract the dull of wit are not to be relied on. Questioner. If those teachings were meant for the dull-witted, I have yet to hear what truth has been taught to those of really high capacity. Wangpo, if they are really people of high capacity, where could they find people to follow? If they seek from within themselves, they will find nothing tangible. How much less can they find a teaching worthy of their attention elsewhere? Do not look to what is called the true teaching by preachers, for what sort of true teaching could that be? Questioner. If that is so, should we not seek for anything at all? Wangpo, by conceding this, you would save yourself a lot of mental effort. Questioner, but in this way everything would be eliminated. There cannot just be nothing. Wangpo, who called it nothing? Who was this fellow? You wanted to seek for something. Questioner, since there is no need to seek, why do you also say that not everything is eliminated? Questioner, since there is no, Wangpo, not to seek is to rest tranquil. Who told you to eliminate anything? Look at the void in front of your eyes. Void not meaning a vacuum, but the crows and the hills and the sun and the cool air, without labeling them what I've just been doing. Just being there. Look at the void in front of your eyes, or hear it, feel it, see it. How can you produce it or eliminate it? Questioner, do you mean that we should not form concepts as human beings normally do? Wangpo, I have not prevented you. But concepts are related to the senses, and when feeling takes place and concepts are formed, wisdom is shut out. Questioner. Then should we avoid any feeling in relation to the true teaching or the truth? Wangpo, where no feeling arises, who can say that you're right? Questioner, why do you speak as though I was mistaken in all the questions I've asked your reverence? Wangpo, you're a man who doesn't understand what is said to him. What is all this about being mistaken? Questioner, up to now you have refuted everything which has been said. You have done nothing to point out the true teaching to us. Wangpo, in truth there is no confusion, but you produce confusion by such questions. What sort of true teaching can you go seeking for? Questioner, since the confusion arises from my questions, what will your reverence's answer be? Wangpo, observe things as they are and don't pay attention to other people. There are some people just like mad dogs barking at everything that moves, even barking when the wind stirs among the grass and leaves. Once I put this question to the Master. How many of the 400 or 500 persons gathered here on this mountain have fully understood your reverence's teaching? The Master answered, their number cannot be known. Why? Because this way is through mind awakening. How can it be conveyed in words? Speech only produces some effect when it falls on the uninstructed ears of children. Though others may talk of the way of the Buddhas as something to be reached by various pious practices and by scripture study, you must have nothing to do with such ideas. A perception, sudden as blinking, that subject and object are one, will lead to a deeply mysterious, wordless understanding. And by this understanding will you awake to the truth. Your true nature is something never lost even in moments of delusion, nor is it gained at the moment of enlightenment. It depends on nothing and is attached to nothing. It is all-pervading, spotless beauty. It is the self-existent and uncreated absolute. Ah, it is a jewel beyond all price. When a sudden flash of thought occurs in your mind, and you see it for a dream or an illusion, then you can enter into the state reached by the Buddhas of the past. Not that the Buddhas of the past really exist, or that the Buddhas of the future have not yet come into existence. Above all, have no longing to become a future Buddha. Your sole concern should be, as thought succeeds thought, to avoid clinging to any of them. This is from a collection of verses called One Robe, One Bowl, the Zen poetry of Ryokan, translated by John Stevens. Ryokan, a hermit living in the mountains, was born in 1758. He mentions a lot the hototogiso, which the footnote says is the Japanese cuckoo. Spring has passed. The mountains and valleys are completely hidden in rain and mist. In the evening, the voice of the hototogiso faded, but now, late at night, again its cry drifts from the bamboo grove. The night is fresh and cool. Staff in hand, I walk through the gate. Wisteria and ivy grow together along the winding mountain path. Birds sing quietly in their nests, and a monkey howls nearby. As I reach a high peak, a village appears in the distance. The old pines are full of poems. I bend down for a drink of pure spring water. There's a gentle breeze, and the round moon hangs overhead. Standing by a deserted building, I pretend to be a crane softly floating among the clouds. Today's begging is finished. At the crossroads, I wander by the side of Hachiman Shrine, talking with some children. Last year, a foolish monk. This year, no change. Once again, the children and I are fighting a battle using spring grasses, now advancing, now retreating, each time with more refinement. Twilight, everyone has returned home. The bright round moon helps me endure the loneliness. Listening to the evening rain in my hermitage, the great way, I braid spring flowers into a ball. The future? If a visitor brings these questions, I have only the tranquility of the hermitage to offer. Late at night, the faint sound of someone pounding rice. Dew drips from the bamboo onto the firewood pile, and the plants along the garden are also moist. Frogs croak in the distance, but then seem very close. Fireflies light low, then high, wide awake. Sleep is far off. Smoothing out the pillow, I let my thoughts drift. A thief has stolen my cushion and mat. Why did he break into my hermitage? The door is never locked. The night is ending, and I sit alone by the window. A sparse rain falls gently against the bamboo grove. In the distance, frogs croak in the mountain rice fields the evening's single song. The rainy season is over. It is now clear. I go out, green fields and cool breezes everywhere. Unable to sleep, I hear the voice of a young deer rising from a mountain ridge. The branches that will be used for this autumn's firewood are still blooming. Please gather some summer grasses wet with dew and come visit me. Not much to offer you, just a lotus flower floating in a small jar of water. I stretch out for a nap in my little hut. In the fields, frogs chant their songs, and the birds in the bamboo grove sing along. The bamboo grove in front of my hut. Every day I see it 1,000 times, yet never tire of it. Back and forth all day, the bent old man carries water for the parched rice seedlings. The willows are in full bloom. I want to pile up the blossoms like mountain snow. Lying on my grass pillow, dreaming about this dream world again, lonely, fitful sleep. As I watch the children happily playing, without realizing it, my eyes fill with tears. Thinking about the people in this floating world far into the night, my sleeve is wet with tears. Oh, that my priest's robe were wide enough to gather up all the suffering people in this floating world. I can't find this one right now, but it's very easy to remember. It says, "The thief left it behind, the moon at the window." Very short passage from Letters to a Young Poet by Rainer Maria Rilke, from a letter written to this young poet in 1904. You have had many and great sadnesses which passed. And you say that even this passing was hard for you and put you out of sorts. But please, consider whether these great sadnesses have not rather gone right through the center of yourself. Whether much in you has not altered. Whether you have not somewhere at some point of your being undergone a change while you were sad. Only those sadnesses are dangerous and bad which one carries about among people in order to drown them out. Like sicknesses that are superficially and foolishly treated, they simply withdraw and after a little pause break out again and more dreadfully, and accumulate within one and are life unlived, spurned, lost life, of which one may die. Were it possible for us to see further than our knowledge reaches, and yet a little way beyond the outworks of our divining, perhaps we would endure our sadnesses with greater confidence than our joys. For there are moments when something new enters into us, something unknown. Our feelings grow mute in shy perplexity. Everything in us withdraws. A stillness comes, and the new which no one knows stands in the midst of it and is silent. A selection from a compilation, a selection of Krishnamurti's sayings and writings, compiled for distribution at the annual gathering 1990 of the K Foundation in India. Questioner: what is this self-knowledge of which you speak, and how can I acquire it? Krishnamurti: you have extraordinary ideas about self-knowledge, that to have self-knowledge you must practice, you must meditate, you must do all kinds of things. It is very simple, sir. The first step is the last step in self-knowledge. The beginning is the end. The first step is what matters. Because self-knowledge is not something you can learn from another. No one can teach you self-knowledge. You have to find out for yourself. It must be your own discovery. And that discovery is not something tremendous, fantastic. It is very simple. After all, to know yourself is to watch your behavior, your words, what you do in your everyday relationship. That is all. Begin with that, and you will see how extraordinarily difficult it is to be aware. Just to watch the manner of your behavior, the words you use to your servant, to your boss, the attitude you have with regard to people, to ideas, and to things. Just watch your thoughts, your motives in the mirror of relationship, and you will see that the moment you watch, you want to correct. You say, this is good, that is bad, I must do this and not that. When you see yourself in the mirror of relationship, your approach is one of condemnation or justification. Therefore, you distort what you see. Whereas, if you simply observe in that mirror your attitude with regard to people, to ideas, and to things, if you just see the fact without judgment, without condemnation or acceptance, then you will find that that very perception has its own action. That is the beginning of self-knowledge. To watch yourself, to observe what you do, what you think, what your motives and incentives are, and not to condemn or justify is an extraordinarily difficult thing to do. Because the whole culture is based on condemnation, judgment, and evaluation. You have been brought up to do this and not that. But if you can look in the mirror of relationship without creating the opposite, then you will find that there is no end to self-knowledge. You see, the inquiry into self-knowledge is an outward movement which later turns inward. First we look at the stars, and then we look within ourselves. In the same way, we look for reality, for God, for security, happiness in the objective world, and when it is not found there, we turn inward. The search for the inner God, the higher self, or what you will, completely ceases through self-knowledge. And then the mind becomes very quiet, not through discipline, but just through understanding, through watching, through being aware of its every minute without choice. Because you're not aware of yourself every minute. Don't say, I must be aware every minute, they say. Because that is just another manifestation of our foolishness. When we want to get somewhere, when we want to arrive at a peculiar, particular state. What matters is to be aware of yourself and to keep on being aware without accumulating. Because the moment you accumulate, from that center you judge. Self-knowledge is not a process of accumulation. It is a process of discovery from moment to moment in relationship. This was said in Bombay in 1955. Toward the end of Vimala Thakur's book, Being and Becoming, the book gives some of the dialogues which took place in Dalhousie, India during the summer of 1989. We are talking about an alternative way of living, which is a meditative way of living. Acquire knowledge, let it flow through you, let it be utilized in its relevant field without creating a knower. If we look at the roots of all human misery, we will find that misery is built upon our stupidity. We do not know how to relate to the structures and use them without identification, without creating a sense of authority out of them. Structures are not sacred. It is only life that is sacred. Patterns have no sacredness, whether you create them in the name of religion, spirituality, or politics. It is the pattern-free, structure-free, virgin dynamism of life that is sacred, that is divine. Wherever you have touched it with thought, you have manipulated it, you have structured it. It has a utility, but not sanctity. It has a utility, but no authority. An alternative way of living is feeding the brain and the system with all the knowledge, the techniques, without getting identified with it. It is only identification with the knowledge that creates an illusion of me, the knower. It is the creation of a knower that builds up your bondage. Knowledge itself has no power to bind you. It is the creation of the knower that is the obstacle. You have a beautiful, sensitive body, and the sensitivity gets in touch with its respective objects outside, and they bring sensations. Sensations are converted back to electric impulses, and the brain interprets them. It is a marvelous process of what you call experiencing. Contact with the outside world through the senses, which are very delicate, very tender. It is quite hard and arduous work to keep the sensual system pure, healthy, supple, and elastic. Let the experiences flow through the sensual system. Nothing wrong in a sensual sexual experience, but you create an experiencer and you get stuck in the experiencer and its likes and dislikes, its value structures, its preferences, its prejudices and theories. If the sensual contact with objects is allowed to flow through you without creating an experiencer, then the limited human-made world cannot corrupt you. As the oneness of life manifesting itself into manyness does not get corrupted, does not lose its vitality, does not get mutilated. In the same way, you acquire knowledge and you appear as an individual playing the role of a father, a mother, a brother, sister, or son. You are one appearing as many. There's no identification with the fatherness, the sonness, the daughterness, the sisterness, and you don't tie so many knots inside, but play the roles sanely, completely, with the magnificence of an inner equipoise. Then your appearing as many, functioning as many, shall not corrupt you. In the human-made world, one has to learn to let the knowledge flow without creating the knower, and let the experiences take place without creating the experiencer. That is the way of meditative living. The word meditation has been identified with psychophysical exercises, concentrations, methods, techniques, kundalini, shakti paths. The word has been abused and misused in such ways. No authority and no effort. Freedom from authority and freedom from the struggle of efforts. Once you know that these human-made enclosures are only to be lived in, then the sense of comparing yourself with others, he has a palace and I only have a hut, he has millions and I only hundreds. The sense of comparison and the ambition for competition disappears. Your economic life becomes simple. No vanity, no pride about your scholarship, erudition, and so forth. And your social life becomes simple. You do not move around with a begging bowl for sympathy, acceptance, prestige, acknowledgement. Reconciled to the limitations, to the enclosures, you live and move in it. Can you see with me that effortlessness is the content of silence? Silence is inner, unconditional freedom from the authority of the past. Silence is unconditional freedom from effort, and therefore the alternative way of living. Meditation has no repetition at all. It is moment to moment. In the moment of relating, you are living. In the moment of aloneness, you are dying. It is living and dying, inhaling and exhaling. To be alone is to die to the sense of being somebody or being something. Is not that the content of death and dying? To be alone is to die to the sense of being somebody. Sinner, saint, holy, knowledgeable, respected, rich, and so forth. To be alone is to die to being something according to the definition of society, according to the value structure of religions. Physically isolating yourself may not lead you to the aloneness. It may not. That is what we are afraid of, dying to the sense of being somebody. Dying to all the images that you have built up about yourself is being alone. The way we are tackling the theme may be unusual, unheard of to many. It is a non-conventional way, a non-traditional approach. But I am grateful, really grateful, that life brings you and me together. Some poems by Mary Oliver from a selection, from the new book, New and Selected Poems. Mary Oliver is a contemporary poetess. When death comes, when death comes like the hungry bear in autumn, when death comes and takes all the bright coins from his purse to buy me, and snaps the purse shut, when death comes like the measlepox, when death comes like an iceberg between the shoulder blades, I want to step through the door full of curiosity, wondering, what is it going to be like, that cottage of darkness? And therefore I look upon everything as a brotherhood and a sisterhood, and I look upon time as no more than an idea, and I consider eternity as another possibility. And I think of each life as a flower, as common as a field daisy, and as singular, and each name a comfortable music in the mouth, tending as all music does toward silence, and each body a lion of courage and something precious to the earth. When it's over, I want to say, all my life I was a bride married to amazement. I was the bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I have made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world. Alligator poem. I knelt down at the edge of the water, and if the white birds standing in the tops of the trees whistled any warning I didn't understand, I drank up to the very moment it came crashing toward me, its tail flailing like a bundle of swords, slashing the grass, and the inside of its cradle-shaped mouth gaping and rimmed with teeth. And that's how I almost died of foolishness in beautiful Florida. But I didn't. I leaped aside and fell, and it streamed past me, crushing everything in its path as it swept down to the water and threw itself in. And in the end, this isn't a poem about foolishness, but about how I rose from the ground and saw the world as if for the second time, the way it really is. The water, that circle of shattered glass, healed itself with a slow whisper and lay back with a backlit light of polished steel. And the birds in the endless waterfalls of the trees shook open the snowy pleats of their wings and drifted away, while, for a keepsake and to steady myself, I reached out. I picked the wild flowers from the grass around me. Blue stars and blood-red trumpets on long green stems. For hours in my trembling hands they glittered like fire. Moccasin flowers. All my life so far, I have loved more than one thing, including the mossy hooves of dreams, including the spongy litter under the tall trees. In spring, the moccasin flowers reach for the crackling lick of the sun and burn down. Sometimes, in the shadows, I see the hazy eyes, the lamb lips of oblivion, its deep drowse, and I can imagine a new nothing in the universe. The matted leaves splitting open, revealing the black planks of the stairs. But all my life, so far, I have loved best how the flowers rise and open, how the pink lungs of their body enter the fire of the world and stand there shining and willing, the one thing they can do before they shuffle forward into the floor of darkness. They become the trees. Singapore. In Singapore, in the airport, a darkness was ripped from my eyes. In the women's restroom, one compartment stood open. A woman knelt there washing something in the white bowl. Disgust argued in my stomach, and I felt in my pocket for my ticket. A poem should always have birds in it. Kingfishers say, with their bold eyes and gaudy wings. Rivers are pleasant, and of course, trees. A waterfall, or if that's not possible, a fountain rising and falling. A person wants to stand in a happy place in a poem. When the woman turned, I could not answer her face. Her beauty and her embarrassment struggled together, and neither could win. She smiled, and I smiled. What kind of nonsense is this? Everybody needs a job. Yes, a person wants to stand in a happy place in a poem. But first we must watch her as she stares down at her labor, which is dull enough. She is washing the tops of the airport ashtrays, as big as hubcaps, with a blue rag. Her small hands turn the metal, scrubbing and rinsing. She does not work slowly nor quickly, but like a river. Her hair is like the wing of a bird. I don't doubt for a moment that she loves her life. And I want her to rise up from the crust and help the slop, from the crust and slop and fly down to the river. This probably won't happen, but maybe it will. If the world were only pain and logic, who would want it? Of course it isn't. Neither do I mean anything miraculous, but only the light that can shine out of a life. I mean the way she unfolded and refolded the blue cloth, the way her smile was only for my sake. I mean the way this poem is filled with trees and birds. Indonesia. On the curving, dusty roads we drove through the plantations where the pickers balanced on the hot hillsides. Then we climbed toward the green trees, toward the white scarves of the clouds, to the inn that is never closed in this island of fairest weather. The sun hung like a stone. Time dripped away like a steaming river, and from somewhere a dry tongue lashed out its single motto, now and forever. And the pickers balanced on the hot hillsides like gray and blue blossoms, wrapped in their heavy layers of clothes against the whips of the branches. In that world of leaves, no poor man with a brown face and an empty sack has ever picked his way out of. At the inn, we stepped from the car to the garden, where tea was brought to us scalding in white cups from the fire. Don't ask if it was the fire of honey or the fire of death. Don't ask if we were determined to live at last with merciful hearts. We sat among the unforgettable flowers. We let the white cups cool before we raised them to our lips. The summer day. Who made the world? Who made the swan and the black bear? Who made the grasshopper? This grasshopper, I mean, the one who has flung herself out of the grass, the one who is eating sugar out of my hand, who's moving her jaws back and forth instead of up and down, who's gazing around with her enormous and complicated eyes. Now she lifts her pale forearms and thoroughly washes her face. Now she snaps her wings open and floats away. I don't know exactly what a prayer is. I do know how to pay attention, how to fall down into the grass, how to kneel down in the grass, how to be idle and blessed, how to stroll through the fields, which is what I have been doing all day. Tell me, what else should I have done? Doesn't everything die at last and too soon? Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life? We will end here for today.